today, listen, is we're gonna finish our notes on this unit. So then tomorrow we'll be working with some nutrition facts and some of that sort of stuff. Then we'll be working on a lab towards the end of the week. Probably we're looking at a quiz, I would guess Wednesday next week.
Wednesday.
I would also, starting tomorrow, bring a calculator. We're going to be doing some calculations with nutrition. So most of the work is actually not that difficult. You can do by hand, but it may be helpful to use a calculator. So you might want to bring that for the next couple of days. So take out your note packet. Let's finish up with this so we can move on. All right, so just to remind you about yesterday, we talked a little bit about some general chemistry terms. We went over some definitions and stuff. Then we talked about nutrients. We went over the 6 nutrients that humans require. And so today we'll be talking a little bit about those vitamins and minerals and exactly why we need some of them and what happens when we don't have enough. We'll talk a little bit about nutrition facts. But I heard someone talk about it a little bit earlier. So we have those 6 nutrients we talked about. And one other thing that's important in our diet is fiber. Now, fiber is not something we actually use inside of our bodies. Okay, it doesn't go into our cells, for example. But fiber is material that's basically undigestible plant material, but it moves through our digestive tract, helping to maintain regular bowel function. So that's also still an important part of our diet. So when we talk about foods, I know you're familiar with calories, so you could look on a bottle of soda and you can see how many calories it contains, or on a package of food. What is that? What do the calories actually represent? Charlie? Well, those things have calories in them, but Gianna? Yeah, it's a measurement really of energy. Okay? A calorie is a measurement of energy that your body can get from foods that you eat. When you eat a food, you're getting some energy out of that, we know that. And the number of calories in that food tells you how much energy you would get. And like Gianna said, technically a calorie is the amount of energy needed to raise 1 gram of water, 1 degree Celsius. But for our purposes, we don't need to really worry about that. Just know that a calorie is how much energy your body gets from the food. And in terms of the nutrients we talked about yesterday, water, vitamins, minerals, they don't have calories. But proteins, fats, and carbohydrates do. And they have different amounts of calories. 1 gram of fat, okay, which is a pretty small amount, but 1 gram of fat contains how many calories, Michael?
9.
Yeah, it contains 9 calories per gram.
And then another one is...
And then proteins and carbohydrates, Jaden, do you know how many calories they have? Yeah, they each have 4 calories for every gram that you have. So if you have a certain food and it tells you how many grams of protein or carbohydrates there are, you can figure out how many calories that represents. Now, how many calories is sort of typical or average for a person to need? Average in a day? Tim?
2,000.
Yeah, somewhere in the 2,000 range. It depends on lots of different factors. The number of calories a person needs will depend on a lot of things. First, on how tall they are, how big they are, whether they're male or female, whether they're growing or not, their age. All of these things determine how many calories a person needs to maintain their current body weight. Now, what happens when a person consumes more calories than they need in a given time? Frina?
They will gain weight.
Yeah, they'll gain weight. That extra calories, our body, it's an adaptation really. Our body holds on to those extra calories, stores them for later use, and it stores them as body fat. An extra 3,500 calories in a person's diet translates into 1 extra pound of fat storage. And the opposite is also true. When a person burns more calories than they're consuming, where do the missing calories come from? So if I only eat 2,000 calories today, but I burn 3,000, well, there's a missing 1,000 calories.
The protein.
Well, it might.
It comes from the extra fat that you consume.
Yeah, it comes from stored up energy within your body. Okay, so if you burn more calories than you take in, your body uses first fat to get that extra energy. So if you're burning more calories than you're taking in, then you burn that stored fat. All right. If we look at sort of what the typical calorie needs are for people, we have this graph here. And so this graph shows from age 3 up to 80, going this way, how many calories a person needs. And so throughout a person, as a person ages, the number of calories they need increases for a while. Okay, but then they reach a point when they stop growing. After that, the amount of calories a person needs tends to decrease. As a person gets older, their calorie needs decrease. Because things like their hormone levels change. They don't burn as many calories, so they require fewer calories. And also, each one is a bar. They're not points because the bar shows, age, for example, 12. Okay, a person that is sedentary, what does that mean? Anyone know what sedentary means? Charmy? Nick?
They don't do much activity.
Yeah, that they don't do much activity. They don't get a lot of physical activity. That's what sedentary means. They require fewer calories because they're not as active. They're not burning as many calories. A person that's very active and exercises, moves around a lot, they would require a lot more calories to replace those calories they're burning as they exercise. So this all varies with lots of different factors. Michael?
So does this have anything to do with metabolism?
It does, and some people have naturally, just because of their genes, a higher or lower metabolism. Some people burn calories more quickly, some more slowly. So yeah, it does. It depends on that as well. Now the government gives us guidelines about how much of various foods that we should eat. And the most recent version of this is the plate. And really what these sort of diagrams are trying to tell us is, how much of various foods we should be eating. And so sort of seems like common sense, but to be healthy, we need to eat a variety of different foods to provide us with all the different nutrients we need. And it should be made mostly of fresh vegetables and fruits and some protein, some whole grains, some dairy. But overall, it's just a well-balanced diet of lots of different foods. Jada?
Why do they have that when barely anybody follows it?
I don't know. Well, some people do. Some people try to. But they try to give guidance so people know what they should be eating. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about those vitamins and minerals. We said we need vitamins and minerals for lots of different reasons. And if we don't have them, we can get a deficiency of them. And that could cause problems. We're going to talk today more specifically about vitamins and minerals and talk about individual vitamins and minerals and what they do. So let's start with calcium. So these are minerals. These are things like you could find in the earth. They're simpler, smaller. They're elements that we need. We talked yesterday about elements versus compounds. These are elements and inorganic compounds. So calcium is found, in milk, in dairy products, but some vegetables as well. And calcium is important for what part of our body? Dan?
The bones.
Yeah, it's for our bones. Our bones and our teeth, they're mainly made of calcium. And so you have to have enough calcium in your diet to provide that calcium to create your bones and your teeth. Now, especially important for example, you guys, as you're growing, as your bones are elongating, you need a lot of calcium to form that bone tissue. Right? Sometimes people don't get enough calcium. If they have a deficiency of calcium, it probably should make sense that they don't have strong bones and teeth. Okay? And their bone tissue, when you look at it, has a low density. There's lots of air spaces and not as much actual bone tissue. Do you know what we call that? So name for it. You may hear about it. Especially this is important for women as they get older. They have to be careful about their calcium intake because of changes in hormones. Their bone density generally will decrease if they're not getting enough calcium. That problem can become worse. It's called osteoporosis. Now this is when a person's bones are not as dense as they should be, and therefore they can break easier. Okay? They can fracture and so forth. So it's important to get enough calcium in the diet. Iron is another important mineral. Iron is found, in high levels in red meat, in nuts, in some like leafy green vegetables especially have iron in them. And iron is important because it's a part of our red blood cells. Part of our red blood cells have iron in them, and that part allows them to carry oxygen. That's the job of our red blood cells, to carry oxygen from our lungs to all the various parts of our body. And our red blood cells need iron to do that. And if they don't have enough iron, they can't carry enough oxygen. The name for that is anemia. And in anemia, a person may be very tired. They may get fatigued. They may be weak. And that's because their blood cells are not carrying the proper amount of oxygen throughout their body. They have less oxygen, and therefore they can't do much activity very, very quickly.
Wait, does fatigue mean tiredness?
Yeah. And so, iron is an important nutrient for these reasons. Iodine. Iodine is important. And this is salt. This salt, though, however, says is not iodized. This salt also is not iodized. If you're at the grocery store next time and you look at the salt containers, if you're near it, most salt is iodized. And what that means is they have artificially added iodine into it, okay, because it's an important nutrient that we need. And without it, there can be some problems. Okay? The part of our body that needs iodine is something called our thyroid gland. And our thyroid gland is in our neck. It's kind of like a bow tie right around your trachea in your neck.
Where's the trachea?
And it's in your throat, your windpipe. And your thyroid gland needs some iodine in order to work. If a person does not get enough iodine, the thyroid gland doesn't work properly and it starts to swell up. Okay? And it can swell up and it forms what's called a goiter. A goiter is an enlargement of the thyroid gland. Now, generally, this iodide, a lack of iodine deficiency, that is not a problem in the United States, really, because we consume lots of salt. Most of our salt's iodized. Almost all of us are getting enough iodine in our diet. This was a problem in the United States. In certain parts of the country, before we had iodized salt, certain parts of the country, the soil was very low in iodine, and therefore crops that grew there were low in iodine, and people that ate those crops were not getting enough in their diet. And so they started adding it to salt to be sure everybody got it. It is still a problem some places in the world. In some places in the world where the soil is poor in iodine, and that's what they use to live off of, or the crops they grow in that soil, they may have a low iodine level, and people may develop very, very large goiters, especially if it's prolonged throughout their lifetime. Jackie?
Can't the thyroid become, my stepmom, she says active, doesn't it cause cancer?
Well, a person can get cancer in the thyroid gland. A person can have an overactive thyroid gland, an underactive thyroid gland. And your thyroid gland helps to regulate your metabolism, about how quickly your body uses energy. And so sometimes a person with an underactive thyroid gland, it's called hypothyroidism, may tend to gain weight very easily because their metabolism is very slow. A person with an overactive thyroid gland may have a very, very high metabolism, and they may not be able to keep weight on and be very, very thin because of those conditions with their thyroid gland. And there's medicine you can take to regulate those thyroid gland hormones. Jaden?
So you're saying like how you have the iodine in the bottles, we can just pour that down our throat?
No. Is that what I said?
Yes.
No, I was asking.
No, you can't. That's poisonous. There's various forms of iodine, some which are consumable, but that is not one of them.
Oh, then why?
They add small amounts to like salt to give you enough. You don't need a lot of iodine, and there's plenty in the foods that you eat.
Then why do you let us touch it with our bare hand?
It's because you're not putting it in your mouth, you're just putting it on a slide or something.
Oh.
Logan?
Isn't there other ways you can get a swollen gland?
Yeah, your thyroid gland, it's not just because of lack of iodine that your thyroid glands would swell up. It could be caused by hypothyroidism or hyperthyroidism. This is one of the ways. Yeah?
Why is it salt colored?
What do you mean?
Like the iodine.
Because there's different forms of iodine, like I was saying, and it's not like that orange stuff. Yeah. All right, now let's move on to talk about a few vitamins. So vitamins are larger molecules, they're organic, and we need a bunch of different vitamins in order to be healthy. Vitamin A. Vitamin A is one that is important in terms of our vision. Okay? In our eyes, we have different types of cells, cones and rods. And vitamin A is important for the rods, which detect the intensity of light. And so if a person is deficient in vitamin A, then they may not be able to see well at night, sometimes called night blindness, where at nighttime or in low light conditions they can't see very well. What food contains a lot of vitamin A and people say you should eat to help with your vision? Tim?
Carrots.
Yeah, carrots.
I was gonna say that.
Yeah, people say carrots. Carrots are rich in vitamin A, and so that's where that comes from.
Somebody told me carrots when you came in.
No, I just was
Okay.
giving you a
Okay.
vitamin B12 is an important one. Vitamin B12 is important to our nervous system especially, but also our red blood cells. A person that's deficient in vitamin B12 may have nerve damage. They may have numbness, a lack of sensation, a loss of balance. In extreme cases, it can even be fatal. And most people get plenty of vitamin B12, but people that may not are people that are vegans, especially. Vegans and vegetarians have to be careful of vitamin B12 because it's mainly found in animal products and not as much in vegetables. So I don't really have to worry about it very much because I do eat dairy products and eggs and things like that. A vegan is a person that doesn't eat any animal products at all, and they have to be aware of vitamin B12. You can take a vitamin B12 supplement, like a vitamin that you take, to help if you are possibly deficient in that, but most people do not. Grace? What's that? Oh, like a vitamin B because it's in like energy drinks and stuff like that. People can get a vitamin B12 shot. Yeah, so yeah, it does. It's required for lots of different things in your body. And sometimes people get an injection of vitamin B12 if they're not feeling well. Yep. Vitamin C, we've all heard of. When do your parents tell you should get vitamin C?
When you brush your teeth.
Yeah, when you have a cold. Yeah. Vitamin C is important in our immune system. It also is important in making a substance in our body called collagen. Collagen is part of our connective tissue that holds our joints together, that forms our skin and our muscle and so forth. And if a person doesn't have enough vitamin C, then that collagen gets weakened. And that leads to a disease called scurvy. And scurvy it's not really, again, most of these, so for almost all of these deficiency diseases, most of us don't have to worry at all about them. If you're getting enough calories, if you eat a balanced diet, you probably get enough of all these vitamins and minerals. Most of these deficiency diseases happen in sort of rare circumstances, or when a person is malnourished, or people in remote areas where they don't have supplements in their foods. But vitamin C deficiency, or scurvy, it was especially common in people taking long voyages at sea throughout history. People that had to travel for months on the ocean in a ship, like they would often live, sailors, yep.
No, it's slaves.
Yeah, slaves, anybody on a trip for a long period of time. Often, they lived on like dried, salted meats and things that could be preserved for the long voyage. And obviously in that long voyage, you can't preserve a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables. And therefore, people were often deficient in vitamin C, and they got scurvy. Eventually, at various times, people sort of figured out that if you brought some citrus fruits and had people on the ships eat those fairly regularly, that could avoid scurvy, because those are fruits that are high in vitamin C.
What does scurvy do to you?
I'll show you some pictures in a
Goes
minute.
into your teeth.
But scurvy, because the collagen, this connective tissue, breaks down, you can bruise very easily. Okay, you can your gum tissue starts to break down. You start off in the initial stages with your gums are sore and sort of bleed a lot. Eventually, they can start to break down, and your gum tissue recedes. Eventually, you could lose all of your teeth if you have this extreme case of scurvy. And I'll show you some pictures of that in a minute. Michael? What's that? Oh, really? Yeah, some people do. And if you're getting like a variety of foods, you generally don't even need to take extra vitamins.
Why do you skip like 5 letters?
We're just talking about certain vitamins. Vitamin D. Vitamin D is important in allowing our body to effectively use calcium. And an interesting thing about vitamin D is our bodies can make vitamin D on their own. When you are exposed to sunlight, ultraviolet radiation, your skin can make vitamin D for you. Okay? And so generally we get enough that way. Sometimes people that don't get enough vitamin D either constantly wear sunscreen and therefore their skin doesn't produce as much vitamin D. People that live in the far northern and southern parts of the world where it's dark for very long periods of time may not be making enough vitamin D. We also have it's added to our milk, and cereals and stuff are fortified sometimes with vitamin D. And if a person has a lack of vitamin D, they can't use calcium properly, and their bones can become flexible. Their bones don't, what we call calcify or solidify as well as they should, and often there are deformities in their skeleton. It's called rickets. And in rickets, especially in children, when young children, babies, and very young children don't have enough vitamin D, their bones can become permanently deformed. And often they have bowed legs where the femur, the upper leg, is curved rather than being straight up and down. And it can lead to lifelong problems with walking and so forth. And the last one, vitamin K. Vitamin K is a vitamin that's important to allow our blood to clot, our blood to clump up. And it's important that our blood clots. If we ever get a cut or damage to our body, parts of our blood block that damage and fill in, causing a person to stop bleeding. So that's what a clot is. And so if a person doesn't get enough vitamin K and their blood does not clot properly, it means an injury could lead them to hemorrhage or bleed excessively. and they bruise very easily because bruising is just bleeding underneath the skin. Sorry? Blood clots are good when they stop you from bleeding at the site of an injury. Blood clots can be bad if they form when they shouldn't, inside of your arteries and veins, and clog blood flow to a part of your body. That usually doesn't happen, but sometimes it can. And that's when a blood clot can be dangerous, when it's inside of your circulatory system.
Why are like bruises dangerous? If
They're not
like
dangerous.
bleeding.
I have a bruise on my knee.
It's not. There is like a cut, basically, or a bleeding in some tissue under your skin, and that bleeding forms what we call a bruise that turns color. It's not really dangerous.
But doesn't it bleed like the blood comes out of your vein?
Yeah.
Wait.
But it stops, like just like if you get a cut, that's not good. You're gonna bleed, but it heals eventually.
Your vein.
Can I drop a trivia?
The scab heals for part of the vein.
Yep.
Then if you get cut right here, the vein just
Yep.
So it's basically a scab under your
It's not so much a scab, but sort of blood that's trapped under your skin.
Guess what? I have a bruise on my knee. That's what it's from.
All right, some pictures here. So when we think about osteoporosis, again, this is the weakening of bones because of a lack of what?
Water.
No.
Vitamin D. Vitamin A.
Vitamin A.
No, it's not a vitamin. It's not a vitamin. No, it's lack of.
No, you're just guessing.
Lack of
Calcium.
calcium.
So when a person is a lack of calcium, their bone tissue cannot form the proper density. This is normal bone tissue. It's made of all that stuff is a calcium compound with some sort of pockets of air inside. A person with osteoporosis has these large air pockets and much less bone tissue. Obviously, this bone with osteoporosis would be much easier to break than this more dense bone tissue. And so that's why osteoporosis is a problem. That lack of bone density leads to a more likely damage to the bone. So again, that calcium comes from dairy products often, and some vegetables.
Scurvy. I should name my next pet.
Yeah, some of that you can increase your bone density. All right, guys, listen. The question was about if you can sort of reverse some of that. Yes, getting calcium, you can reverse some. Also, certain like weight-bearing exercises, lifting weights, causes your bone density to increase. And so often, especially in older women, they'll ask them to go work out, and part of that should be lifting weights to increase bone density. Scurvy. Scurvy is that lack of vitamin C. This is some typical bruising of a person that has scurvy. And so this is that lack of gum tissue, because again, vitamin C is important to making collagen, which helps hold our gums together.
Looks so pretty.
Okay, so you can see it starts off sort of gradual with the gums bleeding and receding, but then it becomes worse and worse until the gums have completely receded and the teeth are barely held in. Eventually a person can lose their teeth.
More.
All right, rickets. So rickets is because of this softening of the bone, because of a lack of vitamin D. Normal bones, you can see the femur in these bones is straight up and down, the upper leg bone. But in a person with rickets, without enough vitamin D, where those bones haven't fully calcified and they're softer than they should be, the bones tend to bow out. Okay, they sort of bend outward as a baby is growing, and eventually that can become permanent. Here you can see a child with leg deformities due to rickets, due to this lack of vitamin D. Okay, and that obviously makes it difficult to walk and painful to walk. Here you see an X-ray showing the bend in those femurs there, or in the, here's an extreme case here. And again, those bones are supposed to be straight.
How do they see it though?
One interesting fact, so people with fair skin and fair hair are less likely to get rickets because they have fair hair and fair skin because they have less pigments in their skin blocking ultraviolet radiation, and therefore they can make more of that vitamin D. People with darker complexions, they have to be exposed to more sunlight to make the same amount of vitamin C. All right, last one for some picture, goiter. Remember, goiter is that swelling of the thyroid gland because of a lack of iodine. And it can start off sort of just an enlargement of the thyroid gland in the neck. And then if a person started getting the iodine they need, it could shrink back down. But I'll show you some pictures here of extreme situations when a person has had a lack of iodine throughout their lifetime. Their thyroid gland can swell up to huge proportions and basically be permanent.
Is there a world record for the largest?
Oh, I think that's a world record right there.
Oh my god.
So again, what you see, so these extreme, all right, listen, these extreme cases, these are almost always people that have grown up in remote areas where their soil is very low in iodine, or basically has none. The crops that they grow in those areas, therefore, and what the foods they live off